Defense, you indicated that you had an issue you wish to address.
There were some women's clothing. Yes, there's a witness who is going to testify next about the search of Mr. Anderson's residence. And there were a number of things that were obviously collected from that house. The state's going to go through quite a bit of it. What we don't think is relevant, and I discussed this with the state this morning, is that there was women's clothing items, excuse me, hidden behind, between basement, excuse me, women's clothing items hidden between basement support beams and block foundation, underwear, bra, leggings, women's clothing hidden inside basement support beams, underwear, string, women's blouse, women's clothing item in a Crown Royale bag, Crown Royale bag with a Wisconsin identification card for someone named Eva Escamilla.
Want to spell that?
Escamilla. There's some writings, but the state isn't getting into the writings. We don't need to address that. We already have an agreement on that. And there's also an agreement that with respect to a lot of the, well, let's just address this issue first. I think that it's irrelevant to get into women's clothing and another woman's identification card that's there.
State.
I think it goes towards the completeness and thoroughness of the search that happened. The jury's already heard that the defendant frequently had people over. So I don't think it's surprising that there would be articles of clothing that are likely not Mr. Anderson's found in the basement. I'm not going to go into specific photographs of each of those items, simply testimony about them. There might be photographs that are overviews of areas where those items were found, but there's not photos of them specifically. It is what the evidence is, and I intended on going into it.
Explain to me items found in support beams.
So in the basement, in the rafters, there were articles of female clothing found concealed or hidden in those areas.
Right.
So I'm sure in cross-examination, it could be gone into, do you know whose clothing that is? Do you know who put it there? Do you know if the downstairs tenant put it there? Because this is in the common area, correct, in the basement?
It's in the basement, correct.
And it's already been identified that the basement was jointly used by the defendant as well as Pete Warbington. I have that name pronounced right.
Just the risk with it is that they draw the conclusion that there's some other missing woman or some other inference they draw that he's involved in another disappearance. And I know I can cross on it, but then I'm drawing more attention to hidden items, and it's a very odd fact. It's not connected to the victim in this case. It is clearly nobody's going to say her clothes. There's no indication of that. I just think the way what the jury could end up doing with that, especially because it's underwear, bra, leggings, blouse.
So going through my notes from the trial so far, I know that in the trunk of the vehicle, there was recovered the shoes, the pants. What was missing was a brassiere and the white top, if my notes are accurate.
Correct.
Is there any indication that any of this clothing items could have been part and parcel of those missing items?
Those clothing items were not identified as Sade's missing items.
Okay. So relative to this, you're offering it solely for the basis to show that it was a thorough search. So saying that, are you introducing evidence of all of the items that were located during the search? And if not, then why is it relevant to your production of your case? Just want me to phrase that differently?
All of the items, meaning everything in the house.
Well, meaning you're saying that I want to show thoroughness of the case, and so that's why I want to go into that, and I understand that. But then the counter would be, so in order to show thoroughness, are you going through everything that they observed or tagged in the house? And if not, then why is it relevant, these items?
I believe that we're showing most of the items that were found in the house. I mean, the photographs depict items that were located throughout the house. The jury will get a very clear idea of what was inside the house, and how Mr. Anderson was living in terms of what was inside the house. So, I mean, this was the evidence that was found. These are items not necessarily that they even took, but it was part of what they located during the search.
The evidence that's already been introduced has included photos of the basement that's already been put into evidence. The items that you're referring to now, are those visible in those photos already?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to go through those photos specifically.
Well, and if it was already introduced in the photos that have been presented to the jury, then I think it's important potentially for the state to comment on what was found there so that they don't do their own investigation and look at the pictures and say, what was that? Why did nobody address that? Because jurors, I find, are quite smart and they do look at items quite closely. Of course, there's always the counter on cross relative to who had access, where did it come from, who put it there. All of those questions nobody has an answer to, I assume.
And so I think to allay the concern, one option would be for the state to simply say that there was miscellaneous clothes. We don't have to point out that it was women's clothes or get into a discussion about it being a brassiere and underwear stuffed in the basement support beams hidden behind the block foundation. Could just say that we searched the basement, we looked, whatever they'll say about we looked behind the walls, and or we looked throughout the basement, we found clothing, miscellaneous clothing. Did any of it have any connection to the victim? No. We leave it at that.
You know, there is the potential for great prejudice to be placed on the defense if the jury goes to the conclusion that women's clothing secreted in the support beams could tie to other unknown victims. And we're clearly not here about other unknown victims. We're here about what happened to Sade Robinson. So in order to reach a balancing, looking at it, is the evidence relevant? For relevance, for thoroughness of the search, I think that it is allowable for the state to say what was recovered in the basement, it was miscellaneous clothing. When I do a balancing under 90403 as to prejudice versus probative value, looking at the state wanting to introduce it solely for the basis of probative, of showing the thoroughness of the search, the prejudice would be, will the jury infer that there are other unknown victims? And that's a great concern. So doing the balancing, how I'm going to allow the state to introduce it is to indicate that a search was conducted of the basement and that miscellaneous clothing was recovered in the basement area of the dwelling. I think that leaving it at that allows you to go into the fact that the search was thorough, but it balances that prejudicial effect on the defense.
I would just note that law enforcement was trying to rule out that clothing at that point when they were executing the search warrant. They didn't know what clothing was found in the car yet. So to the extent that they did analyze it to make sure that it wasn't associated with this, I would ask for a follow-up question. The miscellaneous clothing recovered, were you able to
verify that it did not
was
belong?
Yes.
That it did not belong to Sade Robinson?
We agree.
I think that that's a fair thing to do and a fair follow-up. And I'm sorry, Attorney Cotton, I didn't hear what you said.
We agree.
Okay, I think that that's the fair way to handle this. Okay, so as to the clothing, we've addressed that. You said you had another issue.
There was an identification card for an Eva Escamilla that was found in a Crown Royale bag lined in southeast basement wall. I think that should be excluded as well. It has no relevance to anything.
That's fine. We won't introduce that.
Okay, what else?
We have an agreement on the writings not coming in. The only other thing I wanted to put on the record
What were the writings?
well, it's just journaling.
Oh, okay. And state's not using anything from that?
No, I mean, it was journaling, thoughts, ramblings,
Stand-up comedy.
not necessarily coherent.
Okay.
And then
You've already had an agreement relative to the writings.
We're good on that. We also had an agreement on various suspected blood samples that were located through the home. The state's going to refer to them as stains rather than blood, so it doesn't present a conclusion that there's other victims' blood in the house. None of the samples were of Sade Robinson.
State?
That's correct. We previously came to an agreement with defense about that. The blood stains that were collected by the crime lab, was not Sade's blood. So we've agreed that Kayla Berkey will just discuss those in terms of stains and not mention the term blood. But again, we'd like the jury to hear that this was a complete investigation and that the crime lab came in and took swabs of what they could identify as potentially containing DNA
Where were the stains?
throughout the house.
Was any of it identified as belonging to the defendant?
Animal, I think. Yeah, animal blood, maybe,
Animal blood?
or
Okay.
from one of the dogs, or,
Oh. Okay.
so we have an agreement on that.
I think some of them were, some were in fact identified as blood. Mr. Anderson came back as inclusive on some of them, and I think there were some animal stains. There were stains from sheets, pillowcases that came back to support inclusion for Mr. Anderson, a duvet cover.
But none of it lists back to the victim in this case?
Right.
Okay.
But the point being, and particularly because defense brought it up in their opening about DNA, is that the crime lab was doing a thorough job in trying to collect and swab stains, any stain that they were seeing throughout the bathroom, the bedroom, anywhere. So I think the jury, that's our position, is that the jury needs to hear that that was done and that stains were the focus.
I think that's fair. And I think that your agreement makes sense. So we'll proceed in that fashion relative to that. Okay, anything else?
No.
State?
I indicated to defense counsel that I've got a stack of photographs. They all have exhibit stickers on them. Some of them have already been received into evidence. However, they are not sequential in order. So I showed defense counsel the photographs, and it's my understanding that they're not going to object to their admission or their publication. What I would do is just ask Detective Bierke to look through the stack, and then we'll have to learn about what specific exhibit numbers there are when we publish them, if that's okay.
It is. Do you know the numbers right now on a listing in front of you, or you don't?
No, and they're all mixed together, and we've added some. So there are some in the 200s, some in the 300s, some in the 400s, and they're not sequential.
Okay, I'll stay on my game then. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Just, can we have a minute to tell Detective Bierke about the court's ruling just
I
now?
think that's fair as well.
Okay.
Take a couple minutes, let us know when you're ready.
Thank you.
Feeling.
I'm just feeling a little nauseous, like I just need like a Sprite or something to settle my stomach.
I'm sorry, I can't hear her on the record.
Oh, I thought that mic right in front of her would catch it. We'll give you a microphone.
I said I'm just feeling a little nauseous, like I need a Sprite or something to settle my stomach.
Okay, and you think you'll be fine to stay if we can get you a Sprite?
Yeah, I think that'd be fine.
Okay, if you end up feeling worse or it's getting worse, I'm going to have you notice my bailiffs, Deputy Benz or Deputy Allen. Oh, thank you, Damone. And we'll see if that helps, okay?
Okay, thank you, I apologize.
Oh, no, we're happy to help. I just want to make sure it wasn't something worse than that.
No.
Okay, we'll give you the Sprite. You can have that in the box, and we will bring the jury back in at this point.
Thank you.
That wasn't Deputy Allen's Sprite, was it? Oh, that just gave away. We'll get you a fresh one, just a second. Oh, sorry about that. Perfect timing. And not to be too much information, but if things change and get worse on the moment's notice, there is a garbage can right behind that TV. Okay? No worries. Yes, I'm all ready. Thank you. Okay, we are going back on the record. We are still on the state's case in chief. State your next witness.
Lmetra, Griffin.
Sir, if you could just remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
If you can please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
Lmetra Griffin.
Can you spell your first and last name, sir?
First name Lemetra. Last name Griffin.
Thank you. State?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Griffin, did you at one point work at the bar Duke's on Water?
I currently work there, yes.
How long have you worked at that bar?
Off and on for 20 years.
And what is your job there?
Security.
Has it always been security?
Most of the time, yes.
Through your employment through Duke's on Water and being familiar with that area, did you come to be familiar with a person named Maxwell Anderson?
Yes.
How did you meet Maxwell Anderson?
He was a patron. That's how I knew him.
Was he there often?
Yeah.
Is he in the courtroom today?
Yes, he is.
Could you identify?
We'll stipulate.
Okay.
The record will so reflect. Go on.
All right, and I'd ask the record to reflect, the witness just pointed at the defendant. Had you ever hung out with him not at the bar, or was it?
Maybe like on 2 occasions.
Oh, sir,
Couple-
you know, you're real quiet to hear. Could you move real close up to that microphone, talk right into it? Thank you. Could you re-ask the question, please?
My question was whether or not you had hung out with him ever in the past.
Maybe like on 2 or 3 occasions.
Were those like at bars?
Yes.
Okay. Did there come a time when you spoke to the police about Mr. Anderson around April 8th of 2024?
Yes.
Okay. Were you talking to the police about a prior night, April 1st, 2024?
Yes, I was.
Were you working at Duke's on the night of April 1st, 2024?
I started at 9 o'clock that night.
You started at 9. Was there a bouncer working before you?
Yes.
And you picked up after that bouncer ended his shift at 9?
Right.
That night, do you recall seeing Mr. Anderson at Duke's?
No.
Okay. Did you come to learn at a later time that he was there that evening?
Yes.
On April 8th, when the police came to talk to you, did they ask you or anybody else employed by Duke's if they could review surveillance video?
Yes.
Upon that request being made, did you personally review the video?
Yes, I did.
Did you discover at that time whether or not Mr. Anderson was on video?
Yes, he was.
He was, okay. So he was there at the same time you were there, you just didn't see him?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you 2 exhibits. They're numbered 457 and 458. These are in plastic bags. Celeste, would you possibly-
Oh, here you go.
Starting with 457, sir. Do you, I know it's kind of hard to see in the plastic bag, but do you recognize that image?
Yes.
Is that an image you've seen before from Duke's surveillance?
Yes.
I want you to flip it over if you can. I want you to look at the back.
Oh.
Do you see anything on the back that you recognize?
Yeah, my signature.
You signed that photo?
Yes.
Okay, who's in the photo?
Maxwell Anderson.
I'd move 457 into evidence,
Any objection?
Fine. That's fine, no objection.
Received.
and I'm gonna publish to the jury. I'm gonna cut it open.
Okay.
Actually, there's a second image in here. Did you sign both of those?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Thank you. 457, image number 1. That's the person you identified as Maxwell Anderson?
Yes.
And your signature is on the back?
Yes.
All right. For the second image, again, you identify that as Maxwell Anderson,
Yes.
and is that your signature on the back?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. All right, let's move to 458. Have you seen this image before?
Yes. Yes, I have.
And it's a piece of paper with a series of images on it, correct?
Correct.
You recognize the person in those images?
Yes.
Who is it?
Maxwell Anderson.
Move 458 in.
Any objection? No. It's received.
Did you sign that one too?
Yes.
Okay, on the back?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Move to publish.
Go right ahead.
Oh, there's two of them in there.
And then there's your signature on the back.
Yes.
I have nothing else.
Cross?
Anything come to mind about anything unusual that night with Max, or no?
I didn't interact with him that night.
What's that?
I had no interaction with him that night.
Okay, that's all.
State anything?
No.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. State your next witness.
State calls Kayla Bierke.